Oh, what a beautiful day to fly the old reliable Airbus A320. Got our nice little tray table, we got our side stick, we've got our doors on the plane. Oh. The release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 5 years ago really changed the shape of the flight sim community as a whole. Regardless of what you may think of Microsoft Flight Simulator and how it has progressed over the past 5 years, it has really shaped the way that the community is going to move forward. This is mostly attributed to the simulator being released on console along with the COVID pandemic of 2020. Because more people had access to the simulator on console and because everybody was locked in their house for several months, it allowed an exponential increase to the size of the flight sim community. One of the most popular planes, if not the most popular plane to fly on Microsoft Flight Simulator, is the Airbus A320. If you don't know, the Airbus A320 is a highly complex narrow-body airliner. At the time that this video is recording, it is the most sold aircraft in history, just surpassing the Boeing 737. The A320 took to the skies in 1988 as the first mass-produced airliner with the fly-by-wire control system. The fly-by-wire system uses computer signals for control inputs as opposed to a conventional mechanical system. This by no means was a new system at the time. The development of the fly-by-wire system can be traced all the way back to the 1930s, with the very first aircraft using the fly-by-wire system as we know it now being the F-8 Crusader back in 1972. And while I am certainly not type rated in any of these airplanes that use these systems, nor do I know the intricate details of how this system works, it is one of the safest flight control systems that have been developed because of the protections that it offers. When it comes to Microsoft Flight Simulator, the reason that the Airbus A320 became one of the most popular planes is because very early on, there was a developer called Fly-by-Wire that began development off of the default airplane that Asobo provided for the simulator. Several other developers since Fly-by-Wire have developed A320s of their own, most notably Phoenix, which, upon talking to some real A320 pilots, is one of the most true-to-life A320s that has been developed for the simulation community. One of the nicer things about it is that a lot of the systems are automated. Now, from a simulation enthusiast standpoint, this can be interpreted as the plane is automated and it's going to be very easy to fly, which to an extent is sort of true, but there are some circumstances that can happen while you're flying these planes that you may not be prepared to deal with if you don't know where to look for them. And being that most of us that fly in these simulators are not type rated in planes like this, it'd be pretty fair to say that most of us wouldn't know where to look if real world problems started happening. Today's video, submitted by Dashy Doggo, is such instance where the situation that he encountered is something that has happened in the real world, although the conditions that it happened under for him are not something that you would ever encounter in the real plane.
Down pressure.
Southwest 4-way, clear of 8 left at Bravo 11, looking for taxi to the gate. Delta 1031, runway 8 left, clear to land if I didn't already. 4-way left, clear to
80
land.
knots, neutral.
Delta 4783, clear visual approach, runway 8 left, maintain 180 knots.
100.
Until shell. We'll maintain 180
20.
greater until shell. Runway 8 left, clear for left point. Nope. It's clear for the visual approach.
B1
Southwest
rotates.
408, welcome to Atlanta. Cross runway 8 left at friction. Cross runway 8 right at Charlie. Join Echo to parking.
Positive rate of
Right at
climb.
Charlie. Echo to parking. Thanks for the service.
What the
Southwest 408 GM.
just happened? What is going on? What just happened? Did you guys see that? I have lost my auto throttle.
Speed to 210, then descend and maintain 4th.
What the heck is happening? Uh-oh.
Yeah, United 221.
Do we have an emergency on our hands?
Well, to answer that question, Dashy, you certainly do have a pretty big problem on your hands. What has happened is that shortly after takeoff, some of the systems on board the plane began to fail until the computer system threw the airplane into a mode called alternate law. Now, as mentioned before, I am not type rated on the A320 or really any plane for that matter. The largest airplane that I've flown to date was the Cessna 206, so I am nowhere near capable to describe to you in detail what alternate law is, what it means, or what it does, but I I do know just from some of the videos that I've watched about real A320s that have encountered issues like this, basically the computer system detects a problem and removes some of the protections that are in place. Now, to me, that sort of seems weird because if there was a problem, you would think the computer system would want to put more protections in place. But again, as somebody that has never flown a real A320 and doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge about how the ins and outs of this system work, based on the videos and some of the accident reports that I have read about this situation, this is pretty much what the plane does. Now, the nice thing about this is on the eCam display, it tells you what you should do to try and correct the problem. In the real world, whether or not that's actually going to correct the problem would probably depend on what is causing that issue in the first place. For the purposes of flight simulation, and I say flight simulation specifically because there was some sort of real world accident where what I'm about to tell you kind of contributed to what went wrong. On the overhead panel of the plane, there is one switch on either side that you are going to have to recycle or effectively turn off and back on again. On the captain's side, you are going to look for a switch called ELAC1 or ELAC1. On the first officer's side, you're going to look for ELAC2 or ELAC2. I don't really know the correct way that you're supposed to say it. I just call it ELAC1 and ELAC2. So first you're going to recycle ELAC1 and then you're going to recycle ELAC2. For the simulator, that is going to correct the problem. In the real world, cycling those two computers on a training flight sort of contributed to a crash that had happened later on. I remember seeing a Mentor pilot video about it. Now, while in the real world, I don't really know what triggers this sort of an event. In Microsoft Flight Simulator, most of the time that you are going to encounter this is when you get a sudden live weather injection. These live weather injections happen when you are crossing over from one weather station to another, and there is a big disparity between what those two stations are telling you. 99% of the time, this is going to be encountered over the ocean, or at least for me, that's when it's encountered. So basically, when you are flying over land and then getting out into the water, there is going to be a hard line where the weather information coming from the land-based radar systems are going to differ than the oceanic ones. And a lot of this is because when you're over land, you're going to get real-time, up-to-date weather information, whereas over the ocean, they don't really have any land-based systems that are out there. Most of those observations come from weather balloons, which are launched every couple of hours in the real world. Obviously, in the real world, there is no hard line where you're going to hit that there's going to be sudden pressure, temperature, or atmospheric changes. But with the simulator, when you are downloading real-time data, it is one of those things that can happen. If you're flying the Airbus A320 or A330, I don't know if it happens in the A350. I haven't really had that specific situation occur with it yet. These weather injections can cause this exact situation. And all you do is you reset the switches on that overhead panel, and then the problem goes away. Now for Dashi, this was caused by something a little bit different. If we watch the video, you're going to see two sort of weird events that happen right here and right here. So the issue seems to be caused by him switching between the external and the interior view cameras. And the reason I say this is because that lurching forward movement is something sort of similar that happens when you have those sudden live weather injections. The plane will experience a drastic change in altitude and sometimes a drastic change in speed depending on what the winds change to. When this happens and the plane is kicked into alternate law, you are going to lose your auto throttle and your autopilot system. I personally have never encountered this before, so I don't know if it's a hardware limitation or if maybe his settings are turned up a little too high and it's causing some sort of render lag. Now, I did go back and watch how Dashi was setting up the plane because originally I did not suspect that the plane lurching forward was the cause for the issue. It actually took me about 2 or 3 times watching that video to realize that that had even happened in the first place. The first thing I suspected is maybe the generators didn't kick on because there was a common problem that I was seeing across Microsoft Flight Sim forums and Facebook posts where pilots were suddenly losing power shortly after takeoff, and it was because that they were running on the battery power, and because the generators weren't on, it drained all the power out of the batteries and killed power to the plane. And one of the reasons I suspected that is because in this angle of the video, you can see the ram air turbine spinning underneath the plane. And if you don't know, the ram air turbine is effectively a horizontal ceiling fan that sticks out from either underneath or on the side of the plane that windmills and generates electrical power for the plane in the event the engine generators stop working. Now, ultimately, Dashi was able to take control of the plane and safely land it while still being connected to the VATSIM network. So that is very impressive. But for somebody that admittedly said that they are not prepared to deal with an emergency situation, to be able to take control of that plane, safely put it on the ground while still dealing with the VATSIM network, that's pretty friggin' impressive. Now, for the vast majority of people, if something like this does happen to you, the first thing you're going to want to do is disconnect yourself from the network, because most people are not going to know how to handle this specific situation. This is not really a situation that you want to tackle on the network if you have no idea how to handle it. pilot. So shout out to you, Dashi, for being able to handle that situation. So just a quick recap. If you're flying the Airbus A320 or A330 and the plane gets kicked into alternate law, what you're going to want to do is go to the overhead panel. You're going to look for two switches, ELAC 1, ELAC 2, or ELAC 1, ELAC 2. Number 1's going to be on the captain's side. Number 2 is going to be on the first officer's side. Recycle the number 1 switch, then recycle the number 2 switch. It may take you a couple of seconds to find those switches because there's not going to be a fault light or any indication that's going to point to those switches directly. So it may take you a couple of seconds, but once you find those switches, recycle the first one, recycle the second one, the problem's going to go away. If for some reason that does not fix the issue, just restart your flight. I know that's extremely annoying to do, especially when you sit there for 30 to 45 minutes getting everything programmed and then, taxiing out only to find out 5 minutes into your flight, you're gonna have to restart the whole thing and do it all over again. But at that point, there's really nothing else that you can do other than restart the flight or just call it a day and try coming back later. So that'll wrap up today's video, everybody. I know this was a little bit of a shorter one, but this is something I wanted to draw attention to because of how likely this is to happen with not only new pilots to the A320, but new pilots to flight simulation as a whole. So as outlined in previous videos, this is why I emphasize knowing the airplane that you are going to fly before taking it to the VATSIM network. But it also outlines another thing that I commonly talk about is that pilots are not going to know what they don't know until they're put in a situation where they don't know what they don't know. In the common case where it happens to me when I'm flying over the ocean, a new pilot certainly is never going to experience that because ideally you're going to want some time on the network before you even tackle something like oceanic flying. But a situation like this where you are cycling camera views, there's really no way for you to know that that's going to have any adverse effects on the plane until it happens to you. So as always, if you do have any questions, you can feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And until next time, everybody, this is Cross Hyperu, signing out.